There we go. Right, so thanks everyone for coming. We've got Ollie tonight talking about a scuba diver's journey. So he's going to be giving a presentation and a talk. So I'll mute you all, and if you can put questions in the little live chat at the bottom of the screen, we'll do a bit of a Q&A afterwards with Ollie. We'll read out the questions and then we'll open it up to the microphones if anyone's got any more as well. This is being recorded, so it'll be available on YouTube after the session as well. So we'll hand over to Ollie now. Put you in charge, Ollie, and we'll start the presentation.
Thank you.
There we go.
Hi guys, nice virtual connection. I am gonna keep this fairly light and fairly short because I'd rather spend some time talking with you and trying to find out what it is that you guys want to know and what you want help with, rather than me sitting here and droning on what I think you should know. So let's just start. I'm going to share a presentation here. If you guys can confirm that that's working, that would be great. Is that okay, Dan? Does that work?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you guys through sort of my last 22 years of diving and some of the better choices I've made and some of the poorer choices I've made. And then after that, I'm going to have a little look on sort of what motivated those choices and what I think you could do to sort of improve your route a little bit, or at least the effectiveness of that route. Let's see if we can go to the next one. Sorry. All right, cool. That's working now. All right, so I'm going to go through my personal journey and what were my key takeaway points there, what I would do differently. Then I'm going to have a little look on what I think are key learning components of a good course and what you should be looking out for when you're selecting your next course. I'm going to have a little look on where I think an agency versus a school versus an instructor and you as the student come in that process. What important techniques are during a course, what's important during your practice in between courses, cost, quality, time, and passing, and how I think you can make the right decisions in terms of selecting what it is that you're doing and where and who with you're doing this course with. And then we're going to open up for questions. So it's not that long, but it gives us a nice chance to spend some time chatting afterwards. All right, so I haven't included everything on every slide because it just gets a bit boring, but I started off in Holland and I started off as an NOB, and that might generate some laughs, or CMAS 0-star diver. So that would be the equivalent of your scuba diver. So basically that means that you're not a self-sufficient diver. And that course took 8 weeks and was pretty intense. But that was the way things were done back in those days. That course doesn't exist anymore. But back in those days, that's how they wanted it done, and they ensured that you're taking it slow, which I didn't like. I wanted to go faster. All right. Once I moved to the UK, I got upgraded to Ocean Diver, which was the BSEC next step. And that took quite a lot of time to do. It took 2 months to do that. And so in this column here, I'm looking at the highest impact. So I'm sort of in reflection, what made the biggest impact for me during those courses. And in my sort of second and third course, which was the Ocean Diver course and the dry suit, it was really the support of the club, the other divers around me, that I felt made the biggest impact. When I moved up a little bit further, it was the person I was diving with most. The person I was diving with a lot was more qualified than I was, and he sort of guided me and steered me a little bit in the right direction. And sort of in retrospect, that was really valuable and really important for my learning. And that was sort of the first 5 years of my diving. And in between that, there were lots of hard boat dives and lots of weekends away and a lot of that sort of thing that, that really made a big difference, rather than turning up to a local quarry, which was really not a very much a done thing. We didn't really do that. Apart from Horsey Island, that was the only place we would go. Other than that, it was all sea dives, all boat dives, and a really, really good experience in those first 5 years. Okay, and let me just go to the next one. Oh, it's not working anymore. Right. So the next sort of 5-6 years, I spent some time on the other side of the planet in Costa Rica, in Panama, well, I wanted to do some diving there, and eventually got a little bit bored of looking at the marine life and lack of wrecks. So I enrolled in the open water course, the open water instructor course. And unfortunately, the highest impact factor there was the location, because you're diving in warm water and everything feels easy. And the same goes for, at the time, it wasn't an official course yet, the Side Mount course and the Tech 50 course, which I did over there. Then there's a bit of a gap between sort of this point here and the instructor levels. I mean, maybe a year or 3-4 perhaps, where I wanted to do those levels as well, and I did those in Malta. Okay, so this was a bit of a strange period for me, but let's just move on. Then in the last sort of 8-9 years, things took a little bit of a different turn. Acceleration in terms of learning and seriousness, especially this latter part with RAID, that was all very hard work, but very rewarding. I don't want to dwell on this. There were other courses I did in between, but I don't think they're very important. I kind of wrote these 3 tables more for this highest impact factor, because a lot of them have instructor listed as a high impact, and quite a lot of them also have group support or team support listed as a high impact. And I think that's really important to note that. Okay, so let's go to the takeaway points here. Right, my initial training was quite thorough and very enjoyable. It wasn't easy, and there was no emphasis in we have to finish this. It was always like, you'll qualify when you're ready, and I quite enjoyed that. My follow-on training, and this might be a bit of a shock to you, was based on price, especially low price, ease of passing, because I didn't feel like I wanted a hard course. I didn't want to be beasted. And that's interesting to now see that from the opposite angle. Locational convenience. I wanted to be somewhere warm. I wanted to be somewhere easy. I didn't want to be challenged with cold water and thick suits. I wanted the easy route. And quite a bit of arrogance on my part. I kind of felt like, just give me the ticket. I'll figure it out later. I don't really want to be told what to do. And you could argue that's very immature, but it is. But that kind of dictated my choice of courses, my choice of venue, and I think that's important to just acknowledge that. The final third part of my training was quite challenging and required a lot of practice in between programs, which is good. And I feel that last part certainly is where I gained most. To note that my dive training changed when I changed. And I'll come back to this later in the presentation. I think that the student factor in any course is very, very important. And we can as an industry say, well, why are people not choosing better courses? And I think that the end user has a quite an important responsibility on educating themselves. So a lot of this talk will be about that as well. Okay, cheap and easy. They are neither cheap or easy in the long run. And that was an important one to learn, really, because it just means that you have to redo things. All right, so conclusions. In the beginning, I was told not to be in a rush. From where I'm sitting now, I don't think that there's anything wrong with being hungry to learn more, but I think it's very important to set some clear targets and to give your training a bit of a roadmap. Ensure everything that you were taught is made your own. I think people spend too much time rushing from one program to another, rather than picking a program that sort of enhances their diving or finding out why they want to dive and then pick a program to cover that, rather than just going through the motions. Practice until you can't get it wrong. So don't practice until you get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong. And that's very, very important, especially in between programs. Ensure that whatever skills you've learned are completely grounded before you move on to the next. I think agencies and instructors should advocate higher prerequisites. I think if we are saying that you're going from course A to B to C, if people want to rush things and they don't want to go away and do 10, 20, 30 dives, perhaps we should push them in that direction, or perhaps we should guide them in that direction. And I think that's important for anyone here that are in a teaching position, and there are quite a few of you if I look at the list. Poor skills and lack of experience carries on from course to course until you fail one. And I had to view that myself as well as a student. Doing an easy course somewhere in the beginning will catch up to you sooner or later. It's not real economy. And then the highest impacting factors for each course were almost always the instructor and how much effort they put into delivering a good program and ensuring that everyone worked together and that there was real learning there beyond just what was necessarily written in the manual. And second came the support from others on the course, whether that's on the surface, in between dives, when you're learning together, when you're working together, or whether that's in the water in terms of doing skills together and finding ways of making things work as a group. So what would I do different if I had to do it all again? I would identify my goal. Now that's hard to say because you don't come up more to dive and go, one day I want to be a course director or an instructor trainer. But you might want to say, okay, well, I want to dive these types of wrecks, and I might want to do some cave stuff, or maybe I see these guys on these rebreathers in these mines that are absolutely beautiful, and I don't really care about the rebreather and the mines, but I want to take pictures like that, right? So in order for me to take those pictures, what do I need to do? And I think it's really important that you identify your goal and that you create a roadmap, and that's definitely one of the things I would do different, rather than just going at it. Well, there you go. I would map out the road. Okay, sorry, that doesn't read very well. I would create a roadmap with the help of someone who can help me reach it. I would sit down with an instructor, with an educator, or someone that I think could get me there, or at least partially get me there, and help me make a plan. And that plan could involve courses with that instructor. It can involve courses with multiple agencies. It can involve practice sessions and things I should aim for in those practice sessions between courses, and make that a sort of process that you sit down together and create. I would pay way more attention to the information in between the lines, because there's a lot of stuff and a lot of experience that is transmitted between an instructor and a student that isn't necessarily part of the curriculum, but could be worth a lot. I would look to understand the desired outcome of each course before taking it and see if it matched my roadmap. So rather than just looking at the title of something or perhaps the depth progression of something, I would want to know what it is exactly that I'm learning, and whether it's more an experience course or more a real pushing course in terms of challenging me in my skill set and challenging my ability to do certain things with others, rather than, oh, it says 40 meters, that's what I want to do. There's multiple different agencies out there. They all do different things with 40 meters. Which one's more appropriate for mine? Or maybe I should do like an introduction to technical diving rather than just looking at depth. So I'd really want to know more about the program before I pick it. What is it actually designed to do? All right, key learning components. First one, the choice of your agency, your school, or an instructor. In-course learning techniques, outside course practice techniques, personal attitude, which is very important, other students on the course. Oh, that was it. Right, so we're going to talk about these 5 points, starting with the first one. The agency versus the school versus the instructor versus the student. Where do they come in? Well, the agency sets the standards. They create the learning material. They enforce the quality of these, and they sell the learning material because they're going to make money as well. All right. The school sells the instructor services, and they're there to stay in profit, but they're also looking to build a reputation. Hold on, that's missing stuff. Right, the instructor must follow the standards set by the agency, and I've written min-max here because the instructor could choose to follow the standards to an absolute minimum, or they could choose to follow the standards to an absolute maximum. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just trying to illustrate that it creates a different learning environment. Okay, delivering of the practical element of the learning materials. Okay, there's also a minimum and a maximum here. Again, I'm not stating that one is better than the other. An extreme maximum would make the course very, very difficult and certainly not enjoyable and very unlikely to pass it. So it might not be a good thing to go extreme max, but you want to find a nice balance here somewhere. The instructor should be an educator, not just an instructor. And what I mean by that, instruction is a bit of a one-way street. It's a bit of a, sort of think of the old-fashioned drill sergeant in the old movies, right? I like the term educator much more because you're talking about the whole remit of teaching techniques, including instruction, but also other elements that make the entire learning experience better. The instructor also might be under pressure from the school that they're working from. Okay, they might be told that it has to be done in 3 days or 2 days, and they might not be working at their best. Or the school might be saying, "We want you to be a better instructor. We want you to do a better job. We want you to work with smaller groups." So there's potentially a little bit of outside influence there. All right, students. This is not always the case, but I'm just going to go for the stereotypical student. Wants to pay the minimum amount of money, wants an easy ride, a short course, and wants the recognition at the end of it. Okay, so how does this work in reality? And how should you select your agency, your school, and your instructor? Obviously, you can't select yourself because you're already the student. So if you're looking at an agency, it might be good to look at their standards. What are their minimum requirements like? Are they really high? Are they really low? Are they extremely high? Are they somewhere in the middle of the road? And how do they match your roadmap that you're creating for yourself? Have a look at their learning materials. Are they really strict? You must do this in dive 2, or are they really loose? Does it not really dictate a lot? Do they spend time working with their team? Do you see them, presumably we're talking to mostly people in the UK now, but do you see them working with their team in the UK to make their instructors better, their trainers better, etc., etc.? So when you're picking a school, let's say you found the agency that you kind of like the vibe with, right? Have a look at the class size. Is it really big? Is it super small? Do you want to be in a class with 10 other people, or do you want to have a more one-to-one or perhaps a one-to-2 experience? One-to-one is also not completely ideal because you're missing that team support that we identified as being very important. Look at their club divers, because effectively they're the business cards, they're the advertisements, the diving advertisements they've got. What do their divers look like? Look at their non-passing policies. So what happens if you've enrolled in a course and the instructor feels that you're not quite ready? What's the school's policy on that? Is it free? Well, that might mean that the school is now putting pressure on the instructor to finish within the allotted time, or do you get charged extra for it? And how much? Is it a profitable thing? Is it a non-profit thing? What's the deal there? Well, how do they deal with people that don't pass? Right? It gives you a bit of an indication of sort of the mindset behind it all. Okay, so now you've got an agency you like, and you've got a school you like, and now you're going to look at an instructor. Maybe the school has multiple instructors, or maybe you look at the instructor first, and then you look at the school they work at. It doesn't necessarily have to go in this order. Okay. Look at the diving style and the gear configuration. Are they sort of diving in the way that you would want to end up at the end of your roadmap, or are they looking very differently in the water? If they don't match what it is that you want to do, then it doesn't really make any sense. And how is their equipment configured? Is it all over the place? Is it really, really tidy? Does it match the way you want to go? Are they specializing in perhaps twin set or rebreather or side mount or etc., etc.? Ask for a course outline. I would certainly do that. I am interested in course XYZ. How would you teach this? You know, how would it look like? You know, communicate. Ask them what happens if you fail the course. You know, and this goes back to the same thing here, the non-passing policies, but you want to know from the instructor as well. And I think it's important that you get that out on the table from day one. I remember when I first started teaching, and I hear this from a lot of instructors that I work with, is people are very, very scared to fail their students because they don't want to be disliked. You know, they want the student to think that they're great, and that they're doing a good job. And sometimes what you get is you get instructors that will spend the entire course being positive and positive and positive, and in the last 5 minutes, you certainly haven't passed, and that makes no sense, because if you'd known about it earlier, maybe you could have done something about it, and sometimes that can be a really hard dynamic. So by putting that out, you're making it easier for the instructor to have an open communication with you during the course, and you're more likely to have a much better experience, in my opinion. And as for checkout dive, you know, I think that if I were to pick an instructor that I didn't know, I'd ask them, hey, can we go for a dive? I want to see what you're all about. This is exciting, you know. And don't be scared of that. I think most instructors would be okay with that, to be honest. They would be quite happy to show you how good they are in what they can teach you. Okay, sorry. So what I would consider some key learning techniques that should be taking place in the course. And I would advise you to look at this and see if the course that you're picking contains these elements, because they would make your learning progression faster and more efficient. Training must contain an emphasis on buoyancy and trim. Okay. If it doesn't have an emphasis on buoyancy and trim in the course that they are running, then you're probably not going to learn that much new things. It must contain an element of team behavior. I think it's very, very important that you work as a team. If you're doing a one-to-one course, then it's going to be very difficult to do this unless some of that behavior is role modeled. Okay, none of us are solo divers, unless of course we are, but a lot of the time, I would say 99.9% of the time, you are working in an environment where you are reliant on the people around you. And it's important that you do that in training as well. Must be an element of testing, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Must contain an element of a realistic rescue technique, okay? And I'll come back to that one in a minute as well. Some emphasis on student-guided activity, also important. All right, and let's go into those points quickly here. Okay, so trim, body alignment optimal for the environment or the overall dive requirement, okay? Some people think that trim is always this. Now, if you're diving in a wreck that goes like that, that trim isn't going to help you very much. Me and Kevin were diving in Egypt last year, and we dived the wreck that was on a pretty steep angle, and you couldn't dive it in trim because you just wouldn't be able to move forward. So if we're considering this as trim, you know, it's not always trim, is it? It's perhaps flat trim. In my opinion, trim should be relative to the environment that we're diving. Why is trim important for learning? Okay, so let's refer it back to flat trim here for a moment. I should say flat trim here. Why is flat trim important for learning, or at least trim control? Because it gives you separation. It gives you separation of buoyancy and propulsion. If you are flat in the water, then your propulsion only does one thing, it moves you forward. Your buoyancy only does one thing, it moves you up and down. If you're not flat in the water, those two will get confused. Your propulsion will move you up or down, and your buoyancy will have such a degree of detrimental effect because you're being hit by the water, and you're effectively not streamlined. So you could be moving yourself up as you're hitting the water column. Okay. I've got some nice drawings on that. So if that doesn't make any sense to you, please ask afterwards. I'll send you some drawings that will very quickly explain that. But I don't want to go into that. It's a different presentation. Okay, streamlining. Yeah, the more streamlined you are, the more control you have in the water, and the less energy you exert that you don't need to. Team diving. Okay, if you're in a good trim position, it's much more easy to communicate with the team, to be in the same place, and to see each other. If your trim is all over the place, you might not be looking at someone in the eyes. You might be looking at someone, someone's chest, for example. So it becomes much harder to be in the same place. Okay, buoyancy, a vertical column control. Right? Why is it important? Well, first of all, safety. If you don't have buoyancy control, your progression in diving is going to be cut short pretty quickly. So it's safer. You've got more control over where you are. Motionless hover, super important. Team problem solving. Yeah. If you're working with a team member to fix a problem or to communicate or do a deco stop or anything like that, if you can't control your buoyancy during that, and if you have to continuously move your fins or swim around to remain at sort of the same depth, then you can't be in front of the other diver. You know, I've seen this on numerous courses where you've got one person hovering beautifully and the other one swimming circles like that because they can't stop swimming. Well, it's very difficult for this person now to communicate with this person because they're not in the same spot. So buoyancy is very important. Essential for more advanced diving, as we already said. Also, no reference diving. I know that everyone always says you always need a reference, and this is true. A reference certainly helps, but you can find them in smaller and smaller things around you. And what I mean by this really is if you're always diving close to the bottom and you're using a sloping bottom descent and a sloping bottom ascent, then your buoyancy is never really challenged. So a good thing to do is perhaps not use that reference, come up on an SMB or something on those lines to challenge yourself a little bit. Okay, team behavior. It's going to be a huge impact on dive enjoyment and safety. Okay, from a learning point of view, if everyone's on the same page, it makes a big difference. So what I mean by this is if you've got a group of divers coming into a course and one of them is way behind on the rest in their skill set, it makes it very difficult for the instructor to deliver a good program because a lot of the attention will go on that one student that needs to be caught up. And you might find that the rest of the students don't get as much out of the course as they would have because that one student is perhaps taking too much attention or slowing down the course or changing the emphasis somewhat. Okay, so team being on the same point is very important, or it will certainly help. In an ideal world, you would enter a course with people that you practice with. Yeah, so if you've got a group of friends that dive together, book a course together. It makes so much sense because then you can learn and bounce off each other and you can practice with each other afterwards as well. In my opinion, a good instructor would stimulate team members working together in the water to solve problems. Okay, team members can only assist each other in the water if their diving ability allows them to do so. All right. If you make team behavior important, then the skills need to be better as well. So by making that important in a course, the skills need to be sharper for this to work. So if the course that you want to pick and the instructor that you want to work with makes team diving important, then you know that you're going to have to be a little bit better at your skills because we're going to all be hovering at the same point around each other without moving, etc., etc. So it therefore becomes more paramount that the in-water skills are sharp. Hope that makes sense. I'm rambling a little bit here. All right, testing. Well, what I mean by that is that a good instructor tests their students, right? Adequate testing of the student skills ensure that the skills have been sufficiently learned and understood. Okay. Now, before I read this next bit, it's really easy to run through a course and not give too many problems, because you know that the more problems you give someone, the more chances there are that they don't do them well, and the more chances are that they don't pass the course that day, which means that the course might take longer, etc., etc. It brings complications in. Okay, so if an instructor chooses not to do some of the instructor-induced failures, hold on, then the chances are that you might pass a course when you might not be fully ready to, because you haven't been, what's the word? You haven't been deep enough in terms of your assessment, if that makes sense. Okay. So most courses state something like instructor-induced failures. A lot of instructors, I shouldn't say most, a lot of instructors would avoid this as it would illustrate the student's inability, which would mean that they're not ready to be passed yet. And that is inconvenient. It's inconvenient for the commercial element of teaching, for the school, for the instructor, and for the student. But if you want to pick a good course, then it's important that you find someone that does do this. Yeah, because you will get a better service, even though it might not feel like that in the moment. All right, rescue concepts. Student must grow their rescue skills as they grow their diving skills. Okay, so any course you pick should have some degree of at least a discussion on rescue. I think that open water divers should start with some tows and some basic rescue concepts. As they then become advanced open water sport divers, etc., they should be playing with some lifts and some more tows and maybe some de-kitting. And by the time they do a full rescue course, they're not new to the concepts. They, at that point, are sharpening their skills. And if they then become, I don't know, let's say side mount students, they should learn side mount rescue techniques. And if they become rebreather students, they should learn rebreather rescue techniques. And what this does, I'll continue in a minute. Look for courses that enable this growth. Okay, spend time looking at each other's equipment. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So what this does is it allows your students, or if you are the students, it allows you and your team members to look at each other and go, look, hey, you know, I really like that clip you put on there with that coil and that bayonet thing that then attaches to that other clip, etc., etc. But how the hell am I supposed to get you out of your BCD with all that stuff in the way? Yeah. So if we make it important to look at rescues during a course, we also make it important that we look at each other as divers before we get in, and that we analyze how simple someone's equipment is. Have we got sufficient cutting devices? Are they great large knives like this, or are they safety cutters? Yeah. So what can we do to look at each other before we jump in and pre-assess how complex or simple it would be to get someone A, to the surface in a controlled manner, and B, de-kitted in a way that makes sense. Okay, student guided stuff, cool. I think students should guide the latter 1/3 of that course. Okay, and I think that you, as divers, when you're looking for courses, should be looking for instructors that make this important. This could mean some planning or some in-water sections that you take care of, for example, the ascent. And maybe you have noticed that there's always the same person leading the dive, and maybe this is you, okay? You're stimulating the sheep mentality. In a group of divers, it's always the same person that goes up front. I'm looking at Simon's picture here. It's always the same diver that takes the lead and runs the same route, okay? Especially at the earlier level courses, you know, we're talking open water, advanced open water, that sort of stuff. I think it's very important that if you're taking that course, that you're stimulated into doing some leading of that dive, or taking some lead in the planning, or getting involved with the execution of the dive. Yeah, don't let someone else do it for you. You know, it feels easy, but it doesn't help. So what we see when we're teaching more complex courses or any of the deco courses, you can get the student to do all the skills and they're absolutely beautiful. And then you ask them to lead the dive and do the skills, and all of a sudden it all goes to pots. It is quite tough to do all the skills and lead the dive and stay on schedule and all of that. So the sooner you start with that, the better. Yeah. The sooner you can start with being in charge of your dive planning and to running the dive and doing that on a regular basis, the more benefit you'll have and more the complex courses that you might want to follow. So if you're shying away from that, stop it. All right. Sorry, a bit dry throat here. Key practice element outside the course. Okay. Spend time practicing between your courses. And I don't mean jumping into Delph or Cape and Ray and running a lap, because that doesn't gain anything apart from diving. Okay. Practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Okay. Therefore, perfect practice makes perfect. All right. But what is perfect? That's another discussion, perhaps. Spend time with your educator. I haven't used the word instructor anymore. Spend time with your educating, road mapping your practice between programs. Don't avoid your weak skills. If you do have weak skills, break them down in subparts and focus on the sub elements of the skill until you get all those right, and then put the whole skill back together again. Okay. If you're going diving in between your courses, set a target. Okay, I hate S&B skills. Great. So every dive, I'm going to do 2 S&Bs, one at the beginning, one at the end. Bam. I guarantee it, 2 months down the line, you're going to be the S&B king. All right. Any skill that you don't like, include it in every dive, and maybe keep a little journal and see how it's progressing. Keep track of it. Practice from a neutral hover without moving. If you can do a skill neutral hovering with no movement, you're going to have a really good control of that skill. Once you've got that, maybe you want to practice that skill whilst you're ascending to a target depth. That's quite a lot harder, especially when you're doing it in control rather than just a sort of random ascent. And do this in conjunction with your buddy or buddies, and be clear in advance what you're doing. So don't just randomly start doing a skill in the middle of a dive and start going up, but find people that want to practice and say, listen, this is what I want to work on this dive. I've nailed it hovering. I want to try doing it during the ascent. Can you be my visual reference? What I do is I want to go from 20 to 18 to 15, etc. Right? And let them know what it is that you're doing. They'll probably quite happily help you. Okay, practice only makes sense if you're practicing the right things. If you understand why and what you're doing, if you have review and outside reflection. And that doesn't always have to be an instructor. You can have someone film you, and then you can become your own outside reflection or your own reviewer. Yeah, and you'll look on video and go like, oh, that's not quite how I thought I looked. Okay. Practice makes sense if it leads to something defined and tangible. Yeah. So set that target and make this part of your roadmap. So consult with your dive educator. Let's have a little look at cost and quality. This is probably the most important thing I can tell you. Forget about passing or failing. It's really not important. You're not buying a certification. You are effectively hiring a consultant coach to lead you through the in-water and practical learning, and to a large degree also experience and knowledge exchange on the course that you have selected that fits your overall roadmap. Okay. Passing is just someone saying, yeah, hey, you're now safe enough to go and practice this without me. That's all it is. So don't worry about that. Those are just sort of mile markers, but it's the journey that's important. Okay. Also, forget about needing to get it done while you're on holiday, or the 2 days that you got off, or the week that you set aside. Maybe, if possible, split the course and spend a couple of dives in between where you get the practice. Don't be in a rush. It doesn't need to be done like by that Sunday of that weekend that you've booked. All right. Quality has a cost, and don't confuse cost with value. Okay, there's a big difference. Do your research on all the subjects that we've talked about, and invest in strong and good foundations. They'll make everything afterwards easier. I'm sure you've seen this one before. Good, fast, and cheap one. I know they've got some. Oh, hold on. I know I've got some jokes on Facebook about photographers and graphic designers. You can have good and fast, but it will be expensive, and you can have cheap and good, but it will be slow, or you can have fast and cheap, but it'll be low quality. But you can't have all three. It's not possible. Okay. And this one you might have seen as well. It's been dotting around the internet. Price versus quality, which is the fair value line. Okay. So what you don't want is you don't want something up here with high price, low quality, but maybe beautiful marketing. Yeah. And stuff down here are the unicorns that don't exist, low price and high quality. It just doesn't. So you want something that's sort of in the fair value line. And if you want high quality, then you end up here. That's just the reality of it. Okay. How to make the right decisions. Okay. Could be hard, but a few key rules, and they are not, written in stone, but they are just indicators. I would avoid large group training facilities. They tend not to give you the best personal experience. Again, try to find out what the products of the instructor or school look like. Are they confident, slick and safe? Do they enjoy their diving? Do they go out a lot? Or do they go on boat dives? Or are they struggling, afraid, all over the place? Can't stop swimming, etc. They'll give you an indication of what sort of product you're going to be receiving and what you would look like by the end of the course. I said this one earlier as well. Try to go for a dive with a person that you're eyeing up to learn from. And if you need to pay something for that, then do it. It's not an issue. I think it'd be better off losing 50 or 100 quid and knowing that that's not the course you want to take, or investing that money to make sure that this is the right person for you. Okay. I don't think most instructors, if you say, hey, I want to check you out, can we go for a dive? I think most instructors will be quite happy to do that. And they might want to check you out as well before they start a course. I used to offer pre-course training days where we would just see where someone would be at and if they would be ready for the course, and perhaps give them a couple of pointers to work on in the months leading up to the course. Okay. Don't be afraid to go and ask that instructor you want to train with and say, hey, I've been wanting to do side mount with Kevin for ages. I want to see what he looks like in side mount. So could you take me for a side mount demo dive? See what he looks like, see if he does all right. And then that might make you decide that you do want to learn with that person. And it's probably a lot of fun. I think most instructors would also be quite happy to show you what they can do for you and to basically advertise their product, which is them. Avoid magical discount schemes. Okay, if they have a really complex pricing structure, saying the course is, I don't know, let's say 1,100, but today I'm going to give you 300 off, and you don't pay this, and it just gets way complicated. I think someone that knows what they're worth will have a pretty set charging structure, and will often charge you per day, especially at the more higher end programs. You won't find that in an advanced open water course, but if you're doing something deco or cave, mine, rebreather, they often run with the day rate. And if someone does that, they are probably worth it. But that's not hard and fast. It's just, again, an indicator. Don't think about cheap and easy. Don't get a certain practice afterwards. It just doesn't work, and sooner or later you'll get caught out, or you'll pay for it later. That's all I've got to say. It doesn't work. All right, so I've kept that as short as I could, and let's open it up for some questions. All right, Dan, over to you, mate.
Hey, cheers for that, Ali. That was really good. Some really good advice and guidance there. I really like the bit about practicing the skills and practicing the skills that you don't like. So I never do the ones I don't like, and the only way I'm going to get better is to do it every time, right?
I'll tell you what.
Good advice for me.
I'll tell you what, Dan. I'll give you a really, really brief anecdote. I went through a phase of not wanting to take my mask off, and that might come as a surprise to people, but that's just reality. I don't know where it came from. It was somewhere 15, 16 years into my diving, and I'd never had that issue before. But I all of a sudden realized I didn't want to take my mask off anymore. And it was really disconcerting because we were very teaching at that point and I didn't know how to get rid of it. So I thought, well, I'll just desensitize myself, right? And every single dive, I flooded my mask for months until I didn't mind it anymore. Yeah, and then every single dive, I flooded my mask and opened my eyes and left my eyes open for a few minutes until I didn't mind anymore. And then every single dive, I would remove my mask and swim without my mask for a couple of minutes until I didn't mind anymore. And that's how the problem went away. You just you can't avoid what you don't like. It doesn't fix the problem.
That's it. That's how you're going to get better, right? That's good. Yeah, so we got a few questions. We got like 15 minutes left, so I'll read out some questions for you if you like. We've got a lot of people asking you what your best ever dive was. You want to go into that really quick? We've got about 4 people asking that.
I tell you what,
and also your worst dive as well.
Yeah, they happened in the same year, funnily enough. Well, I've got more bad dives. No, I'm joking. My best ever dive was probably on the Kiara. It was this is a wreck on the south coast. It was somewhere in my first 300 dives. And it sounds horrible, but someone had popped up the day before and gone to the chamber, so everyone was really apprehensive on the boat because there was no incident, there was no injury, but everyone was really apprehensive because we didn't want that to happen, and we were doing a night dive and it was very exciting. And I just remember coming down on the wreck and I had a little bit of narcosis going on, and I remember looking down that line and going, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And because it was a night dive, you couldn't really see much. Then we hit the wreck and saw everyone's, at the time, HID and halogen torches everywhere, and they're just, great. It was like a scene from a movie. Yeah, and that's definitely one of the most exciting dives I did, for sure. What else? Another dive. I like all the Scapa stuff very much, and any of the exciting wrecks in Malta. Worst dive. Yeah, it also goes back to probably one of the first 50 dives I did. This might have been after the Chiara in an afternoon dive at some point. It was a site on the south coast. And I decided at the time, I had a Sunto Cobra integrated air computer, and I decided I was going to play with the settings, even though I didn't know what they did. I changed loads of things because it was cool, and that was the only reason. And the dive is a drift dive where the bottom sort of does this. So you might be drifting along nicely, and all of a sudden the bottom falls away from you, and it gives you the illusion that you've popped up. So I dumped all the gas out of my BCD at the time, and I got back down, and then the bottom does that, it comes back up quickly again. So you're kind of dragging yourself over the bottom, and this turned into an absolute up and down mess between me and my buddy, to the point where both of our computers were blaring away, mine more than him, because obviously I'd been messing with all the settings on it, and I don't know what I'd done. I put the safety on or something stupid like that. And then our S&B lines entangled into each other, and it was just like the biggest nightmare ever whilst you're drifting at a fairly high speed. And I was just, came to the boat, and it was just an utter shame. So that's
sounds pretty intense.
In hindsight, it was nothing serious, but it was just one of those dives where I'm like, I just made all the wrong decisions, and I didn't overly enjoy it. There you
go. Yeah, fair. Another question, this is more about training. So now that the e-learning material is out there for free, would you recommend going through a load of theory and courses before you commit on?
No.
Why is that?
Everyone was like, oh, he's going to say yes. I would say there's a couple of RAID instructors on this list here. So just to clarify, what Dan is referring to is the RAID free material, which you can look at all you like. So what I would do is I would speak to your local RAID instructor and have a little chat about what courses you think you're interested in, and then with their guidance start looking at them, because the chances are, if you are just going to open loads and loads of programs and you're going to read a little bit of this one, a little bit of this one, you're probably going to get lost, maybe lose interest, maybe end up reading something that's not the right course for you. So do it with a bit of guidance. It's all part of that roadmap. I wouldn't
Sounds
just
good.
randomly go and open 4 courses.
That's cool. I'm just going to unmute Anthony. He's had a few questions. So, Anthony, do you want to ask the next one?
Okay. Good presentation. Thank you, Ollie. Where did you find the best diving for enjoyment and technical reasons in the UK in particular? So, when you're away on a trip, where did you find it was great fun, but also technically demanding, or I don't know, just a great place to learn new skills, or whatever the case may be?
For me, learning new skills is a quarry. I like the consistency of the diving conditions, the lack of current and tidal limitations that give me the chance to practice new skills there. When I go and actually do a dive, I don't practice new skills. I just enjoy the dive there. Of course, you're still practicing because there might be a current that changes, etc., etc. But I think keep them separate. For me, quarries are not for fun dives. They're like the gym. You know, you go there to exercise, and then, you know, for whatever reason you're exercising, use the skill afterwards. I'm one of those people. I kind of enjoy most dives, to be honest. It's not. I don't need to be in a place that no one's been to before. But I did do some dives with the NAS last year on a project that I can't give any information away about, unfortunately. But doing a dive with a reason and a task is very enjoyable for me, rather than just going down and seeing something. And don't get me wrong, I love going down and seeing something, but doing something with a reason, you know, measuring something or exploring something or digging something up, or that's the stuff I want to do more of. You know,
that was going to be part B of my question, actually, is when you do go on a trip, either the UK or overseas, how would you structure them to get the best of education versus fun versus experience? And you're saying structure, go there with something in mind to go something achieve or see.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. I get where you're going from. Yeah. So Malta is a good example. We do a lot of training out there. We might use a shallow site for 1 day, 2 days to get the majority of all the skills done. And then we continue the training on the actual dive sites. So we'll sit down and go, like, we're going to look at this wreck. We're going to swim out for 10 minutes with I don't know, that compass bearing. Then we're going to go down further. This is what the wreck looks like. Okay, how would we penetrate the wreck? What route would we take? Okay, what point do you think we should turn the dive? What point do we need to check in with each other? So I would use an actual dive site and an actual dive to train and to practice, but only if the core skills had been practiced and if they've been good enough. And then as we progress, then the wrecks become more complex and the depth becomes greater, etc., etc. Does that answer the question?
Great, thank you.
Cool.
We've got one from Matt Rivet as well, which is sort of related. Matt, do you want to ask your question next? Just unmute you.
Hi. My question was basically the same. I do a lot of practicing skills in the pool, but don't get to do much practicing when diving in open water, Stony Cove or whatever. Do you think it's important to practice in open water as well as practicing in the swimming pool?
Yes, I think it's great that you're spending time practicing in the pool. I think more people should do that because it's a nice, easy environment. It takes some complexity out of it. So if you consider the pool sort of practice ground number 1, and then Stony Cove practice ground number 2, then you've got your sequence of things in place there to go jump on a boat of Anglesey and put it to practice. If that makes sense. Now, practicing Stony Cove is still going to be important because you're going to be diving your dry suit, you're going to be diving your thicker undersuit, you're going to be diving with thicker gloves, a thicker hood, and it'll be infinitely more challenging than your shorty that you're wearing in the pool.
Cool. Cheers.
Okay, we got Agnes with another quick question. I think it'll probably be the last one. Agnes, do you want to go away?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Probably it's not like a very clever question, but you mentioned dive educator. is it someone skilled? Is it instructor, or is it just your dive buddy? Or
Okay, yeah, let me clarify that. I don't like the term diving instructor. I think the term is limiting, and I think that as dive educators, i.e. instructors, we should strive to be more than just an instructor. If you look at the definition of instructing versus educating versus teaching, you'll find that there are distinct differences, and an instruction is a very a limited interaction. It's a very much a one-way street. And I feel that if we term ourselves dive educators, and we try to embody what is linked with that as a definition, then we will probably do a better job. So I don't like using the term dive instructors too much, if that makes sense. I feel instruction is a very important part of the learning environment, but I also feel that, like for example, if I have a group of students that are about to make a mistake, allowing them to make that mistake, and then in a safe environment, of course, and then reflect upon that afterwards, is an educational technique, but it's not instruction, if that makes sense.
yes, thank you.
Cool.
Cool. I think we got one more, actually. Good question from Gav. Are you around, Gav? Do you want to ask your question? I'm not sure if he is. It's cool. So Gav's question was, how does dive instructor compare to driving instructors who will teach for the money until the student's ready to take the exam, as opposed to a fixed price in a diving course, when the student will have a varying ability to learn the skills and then they take the exams?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think that the fixed price is generally not really based on the average student. It's based on the minimum criteria for the course, which is a problem. So, for example, at Dive Live, what we do is we say, well, the course is 6 dives, and therefore it will take this long, and therefore it will be this expensive. However, you might not pass in that period of time. It completely depends on your ability, your existing ability, etc. So what we do, for example, is we only charge cost price after that. So the instructor doesn't make a huge extra by doing more dives, and the dive center makes nothing extra. All right. The reason we do that is the following. I feel as if we set a set price as a center and say, if you need an extra day, it's not a problem. Yeah. If we say, well, you've paid £500 and that's it, then I'm going to tell my instructors, I want you to finish that course in the allotted time, and preferably quicker, because I'll make more money. Yeah. And I'll say to I'm not saying that this is what I do, but the mindset could creep in where I would convince the instructor to perhaps, I don't want to say cut corners, but there would be a pressure there to finish, regardless of the skill, the actual skill of the student. The other sort of end of the spectrum is where I would charge a full extra rate for the student, which is often done in technical courses, and it's a little bit different. But I don't want my students to think, or my clients to think, that we are lengthening the course purely for profit reasons. So what we've chosen to do is to say we only charge cost price extra if we feel that you really, really need it. And I'd say maybe that happens 30% of the time. Our courses have sort of a buffer built into them anyway, in terms of dives and times, and therefore pricing. Yeah, obviously Gav isn't here, but has that answered the question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that answers it for me. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And Steve's chipped in as well. Steve Lewis, who spoke last week, he said that many instructors will guide and mentor a diver and charge a day rate, just as an example.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, like I said in the presentation, anyone charging a day rate tends to know their own value. And I will certainly charge a day rate, and the majority of our higher end programs are based on day rate plus base cost on the average amount of dives or days that we think it will take a program. So even though they might be advertised as a fixed cost, really what they are is just a placeholder for a day rate.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, Ollie,
Kev, do you want to jump in?
I got one quick one for you, Ollie. I know we spoke on this earlier briefly, but I think it's quite important to talk about a roadmap and a flowchart. You know, the differences in a flowchart and a roadmap. You know, we all map our journey. However, you know, you go into a dive centre and they've got a flowchart. Now, that flowchart might not replicate your journey. Which is why we do, you know, bounce about from one agency to another. Now, some people don't like that. Other agencies don't like you doing it. But I feel personally, and, you know, and I want to get your view and the view of the people as well on how important is it to be able to move about really and pick your journey rather than following a flowchart.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Kev. And obviously, you know, I would prefer people to do training with RAID for obvious reasons. And then saying that, one of the best courses I ever did was the BSEC Rescue Management course.
Yeah.
And we don't offer that at RAID. So if people wanted to do something like that, they have to go somewhere else. Let me just highlight why that was one of the best courses we did. I think from memory, we had 5 or 6 boats in the water. We had a Coast Guard helicopter. I think we had a division of the local armed forces joining, and there were about 60 or 70 divers taking place. It was a massive thing, and it was very impressive. 5 or 6 instructors co-teaching, very, very cool event. And I learned absolute shit tons. Sorry, am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, you can say that.
Okay. So the question is, you know, why don't we just keep hopping agencies? Because you could get lost in that journey as well. I think a lot of people, you know, when they sort of join the PADI route and they continue with the PADI route, or they join the BSEC route and then they continue with the BSEC route, or the RAID route for that matter, it's because it takes the sort of thinking out of it a little bit. You know, the flow charts that agencies develop are set up in a way to give you a, I don't want to use a McDonald's as an example, but to give you a sort of predefined roadmap. And it's the sort of, you know, it's the core line is there already. You know, you can't do a rescue course before you do an open water course. That's logic. So the roadmap that the agencies provided you is like, hey, listen, this is our core line of courses that you should follow. So if you don't want to get lost, then perhaps pick an agency that most matches what you want from your dive training and follow that core roadmap. And if there's things that you need to bring on board that agency doesn't offer, just have an honest chat with your instructor and say, listen, I really want to do a, I don't know, zombie diving course, and only PADI offer it, and I think it's going to make a real difference in my diving, then go and do that course. And if you wanted to do rescue management, go and find a really, really, really active BSEC instructor that is on the ball with their training and does things a modern way, and go and do that course. It's not going to hurt you. But and then a confident instructor that you're learning from would have no issue with you looking somewhere else. If they have a real issue with you looking somewhere else, then, you know, perhaps they are not the instructor that you thought they were. You know, all that will happen is that you will appreciate them more if they did a good job.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that, Ollie. I'll hand you back over to Dan now. Unfortunately, guys, we have we've hit our hour, and we're sort of running out of time, so I'm going to hand it over to Dan.
Yeah, so we'll wrap it up there. Thanks, Ollie, for that. That was really good. We'll put the video of that on YouTube, and if you don't mind, we'd like to share your slides as well if anyone else wants to read those afterwards. So thanks everyone for coming. Next time we've got Lanny Vogel joining us from Mexico. Lanny, he runs a dive center in Mexico called Underwater Tulum, and he runs cave camp every year. And his talk's about cave diving. It's called Learning from Cave Diving, 7 lessons for recreational divers. So sign up on the Facebook page for 7 Tech, and we'll hopefully see you there next Tuesday, same time at 7. Thanks for that, everyone. I'll see you then.